look back at some of how we got into this war, but then we're also going to look at the different aspects of the war. We have this war taking place in two different theaters, meaning two different parts of the world at the same time. We're going to have some differences in terms of how America gets involved. Remember, we're coming out of the Depression and New Deal, so we have plenty of our own problems going on at the same time. So after World War I, we see a rise in totalitarianism, which is a government philosophy by which one person retains control. So people don't really have a voice in their governments. And we get that happening in the Eastern Hemisphere after World War I. The countries who were the losers in World War I were really those that were susceptible to these types of takeovers in their government. We get a global depression, and then to couple that, failures in the Treaty of Versailles, the document that had ended World War I. So we get the totalitarian leader who has become infamous in World War II, of course, Adolf Hitler, his government being Nazism. Soviet Union will have a communist leader, Joseph Stalin. Italy will be fascist under the leadership of Benito Mussolini. And then Japan will be a militaristic nation under the leadership of Prime Minister Tojo and Emperor Hirohito. But basically, the big thing that's going on here is a failure in terms of how the world was managed after World War I, coupled with a lot of economic failures. So what are we going to do about it? Many of the former Allied nations will engage in a philosophy of appeasement, trying to maintain peace, trying to avoid involvement in a second world war. So Hitler will take advantage of that policy, and he will militarize the Rhineland, which is that area on the western part of this map here. You can see the Rhine River here on the west coast of Germany. And so as one of the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles stated, Germany was not allowed to have a military. They weren't allowed to raise a military, and they weren't allowed to use a military. That was part of their punishment in the Treaty of Versailles. Remember, President Wilson really disagreed with having that provision in the treaty. He was very concerned about punishing Germany and creating this sort of resentment that we see here. But the other allies were insistent that that needed to be a part of the treaty. And so we get Germany ignoring that rule in the Treaty of Versailles, raising a military anyway, and sort of flexing on the rest of the world by stationing that military in the Rhineland. So Hitler does that in 1935, and he will continue to spread his military all over Europe over the course of the next few years. We also see occupation of other areas of the world by dictators. So Italy and Mussolini will occupy Ethiopia in 1936. Japan will start to invade the mainland areas of Asia, specifically China and Southeast Asia. And the US will actually employ sanctions to try to limit Japan from gaining that kind of power. So basically, due to our industrialization, the US is a huge producer of military equipment, weapons, and we sell that to nations all over the world. Because we want to protect democracy, we try to stop Japan from engaging in this type of takeover by refusing to sell them weapons. So we're not getting into a physical altercation with them. We're not employing soldiers or our military, but we're using our economic resources to try to leverage some power here. So cutting off the sale of weapons to Japan once Japan starts to mobilize and try to imperialize. And that will create tension between Japan and the US. So these dictators are campaigning, trying to build their empire, trying to use their militaries to take over parts of Europe and Asia during the 1930s, while the US and our European allies do nothing, because we're trying to avoid a second world war. We're hoping that these efforts won't be successful and that things can sort of go back to normal. Of course, we know that that's not true. Appeasement did not work. So war officially begins when Hitler invades Poland. And in response, Britain and France declare war on Germany. So 1939 and the invasion of Poland by Hitler's Nazis will mark the beginning, the official beginning of World War II. Germany is going to use some advanced and new military techniques that lead to a huge loss of life in World War II. The Blitzkrieg technique, or lightning war, will be one of their biggest tactics, where they rapidly, quickly deploy both tanks on the ground and planes in the air. So they're attacking and bombing on the ground while simultaneously doing some air bombings, and the enemy just simply doesn't have time to respond. So that lightning war Blitzkrieg technique will be a good one for Germany in the beginning of this war. And Germany not only employs this tactic in military areas, they actually start to bomb civilian areas, population centers, including London, and we'll talk about that. So the Soviet Union, remember, alliances are a huge factor in World War I. They will be in World War II as well. The Soviet Union, an ally at this point of Germany, will invade Poland as well from the east in 1939. So we see Hitler and Stalin teaming up in an alliance. How does America respond? Following our efforts in World War I, where we came in at the end, helped the Allies, and secured the victory, the rest of the world is sort of looking to the U.S. What are you going to do now that you see this happening? And the answer was the same thing we did in World War I. We want no part in what we're seeing as a European war, and we officially declare neutrality through a series of acts that are passed. So we passed neutrality acts in 1935, 36, and 37. However, we still use that economic leverage point, prohibiting the selling of weapons to nations at war. That was an example. Japan, cutting off the sale of weapons to Japan, is an example of this tactic. We also prohibited the travel on ships of nations at war. So again, we're sort of acting from afar. And you can see that in this political cartoon. So you see the old man represents the Neutrality Act, but his beard is so long that it's reaching in, and it actually is doing things. Even though he appears to be sitting there peacefully doing nothing, he is interfering in different ways. So you can see here, pulling the weapons off of that ship. We also prohibited the credit or loan to nations at war. So we're trying to, again, use our economic power instead of our military power. So with the Allies declaring neutrality, with the US declaring neutrality, Hitler takes advantage, and he wants to take over as much land in Europe as he can before the US gets involved. So by 1940, Hitler has taken over France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Denmark, and Norway. So the only ally left standing is going to be Britain, which leads us to the Battle of Britain. So Hitler is planning a land attack on Britain, again, trying to cause as much destruction as he can before the U.S. decides to get involved. So he's really trying to bring out the big guns early. Hitler knew that his navy couldn't compete with the navy of Britain. Britain's navy is the strongest in the world at the time, so he depends on his air force to bomb Britain continuously, to engage in that Blitzkrieg tactic. Again, targeting both military areas as well as population centers, cities. However, Hitler is unable to defeat Britain, and he turns his attention back east. What are we doing here? By 1940, Britain is the only nation left in Europe unscathed by Hitler. And Roosevelt decides that we have to step in some capacity to help, because Germany is threatening the safety of democracy all over the world. So what is Roosevelt's solution going to be? Remember, he is dealing with a lot here on the homeland. He just did this whole New Deal economy reboost. We don't have the really stamina to get involved in the war at this time. Roosevelt passes the Selective Service Act, so he does put a draft in place just in case we have to call soldiers to war. He does start to build up the military, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, but he's not going to send soldiers right away. The first thing that he does is creating something called the Lend-Lease Act. So we'll look at that in a second. But basically, we start to just loan equipment, weapons to Britain. Instead of actually sending soldiers, we send the next best thing, which is our goods. So the Destroyer for Bases deal gave Britain some of our weapons in exchange for the right to build military bases on British territory. So we got something, they got something that they needed. Then the Lend-Lease Act is probably the most important. So it gives the president the authority to loan supplies to our allies. And FDR famously says, this is like lending a garden hose to your neighbor whose house is on fire. You're not going in, you're not fighting the fire with your neighbor, you're not going to run in and save their kitten, but you'll let them use your hose to put out the fire themselves. So again, we're not sending in soldiers, we are loaning equipment to our allies so that they can help themselves until December 7th, 1941, which Roosevelt calls a date that will live in infamy. Does anybody know what happens on that date? The tree in this photograph hopefully gives you a clue. Anybody familiar with that date? Exactly, Pearl Harbor. Exactly, Elizabeth. Yes, so the December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii is what will instigate the U.S. actually joining this war from a military perspective. Japan attacks the United States at Pearl Harbor. This was a complete surprise. The U.S. was not expecting, and this was Japan's response to our cutting off the consumer relationship we had with them. When we stopped selling weapons to them, they became angry and we get attacked by Japan. So we're not even looking at Japan when this happens. We're really interested in Hitler and what's going on in Europe, and we're sort of sneak attacked in the Pacific. So when I talk about two theaters to this war, that's what I mean. We've got Hitler going on in Europe, and then simultaneously we've got a situation going on in the Pacific and Asia with Japan. And so the Pearl Harbor attack will force the U.S. to be involved in both areas. So we'll talk about that more next class. What we're going to do now is we're going to watch America, the Story of Us, my favorite documentary, and it's going to be, this episode is an overview of World War II. So it'll kind of give you a big picture, and then we'll dive more detailed into these other facets of the war in our notes for the next few days. Questions before we watch? So you're going to want to open the reflection, which is in the Unit 8 Day 1 folder, America, the Story of Us, World War II. Pull that up while I get the video up and going. We will have a quiz today. So right when the movie is over, we will take the quiz. And I'm going to record the movie as well, just in case if you miss anything and you need to go back and get an answer.
World War II strikes America. The country fights back like never before. World War II strikes America. country fights back like never before. America becomes the most powerful war machine the world has ever seen. By entering the war, the United States transforms itself into a superpower in only 4 years. We are pioneers and trailblazers. We fight for freedom. We transform our dreams into the truth. Our struggles will become a nation. America prepares for battle. The 1930s meant poverty, no future. But with war comes purpose and determination. American industry goes into overdrive. It will go to war with the economic and military powers of the Axis: Germany, Italy, and Japan. Now, every weapon, ration, medical supply is mass-produced on a scale never seen before in human history.
Sometimes it takes a terrific challenge and a horrific threat to the Republic to discover how good you can be.
But the road to greatness begins with treachery. December 7th, 1941. 200 miles north of Hawaii. A pack of cutting-edge killing machines are on a mission to destroy the American fleet at Pearl Harbor.
The Japanese Zero was a better fighter than anything the Americans had produced at that time.
The Japanese Zero. It can fly 2,000 miles without refueling. Perfect for a surprise attack.
When Pearl Harbor was attacked, it was one of the most stunning moments in American history.
Now, 183 Japanese bombers and fighters are heading straight for Hawaii. Another 170 follow right behind. Japan has built an empire across Korea, Manchuria, and Hong Kong. It wants the whole Pacific Ocean. But the U.S. fleet in Pearl Harbor stands in its way. Opana Mobile Radar Station, 30 miles north of Pearl Harbor. Radar operator Joe Lockard makes first contact.
What's this?
2 blips are showing something out to sea. Radar is still experimental technology in 1941. Its importance is about to be realized.
If I could reach out and touch you from greater distances, I had a tactical, strategic advantage.
Radar will evolve into a system essential to the modern world, tracking 10 million flights around America and 5 billion passengers around the world every year.
Definitely incoming.
So far, America has kept out of the Second World War.
We had almost our whole fleet in one little harbor, one little area. We were sitting ducks. But then again, we trusted in the Japanese. At the same time, we were having peace talks with them. They even gave us a peace medal.
America is about to receive the biggest wake-up call it's ever known.
Operator?
Private Joseph McDonald of the 580th Aircraft Warning Division.
Yeah, this is Opana. It looks like there are a large number of planes coming in from the north, 3 points east.
I think everyone's gone off shift. Hold on.
It's early Sunday morning. Japan is over 4,000 miles from Hawaii. Pearl Harbor is not expecting to be attacked. The surprise attack, once the specialty of American riflemen in the War of Independence. The tactic that made America free is now being used against it.
We still got planes coming in. It looks like an awful big flight.
Okay.
Lieutenant Kermit Tyler. He knows there is a flight of American B-17s due in today. He assumes that's what's on the screen.
Well, look, don't worry about it.
What do you think it is, sir?
Nothing.
Though radar is invented and used by the British as early as 1935, this SCR-270 mobile radar system was developed by the U.S. Army. But radar is still considered a gadget by the military. There are only 5 radar trucks to cover the whole of the Hawaiian Islands. They're only manned 3 hours a day.
20 miles.
Radar has another weak point. It can't see through Hawaii's mountains. The low-flying Japanese squadron vanishes from the screen. Shift over. There's nothing more the men can do. McDonald types up his report.
Bob, take a look at this, will you?
Today, America pays the price for neglecting radar.
When did this come in?
At 7:50 a.m., the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Most of the Marines and sailors were still in the rack. They were still asleep. We had no idea that this was going to happen. But we all know that it did.
The Japanese have prepared this attack for a year. They have rehearsed bombing a model of Pearl Harbor in Japan until they reach an 80% hit rate. All 8 battleships are put out of action. (1,178) Americans are wounded. 2,403 are killed. Private McDonald's report was finally read, but by then it was too late.
A day that will live in infamy. We were completely unprepared for that emotionally. And it turned the country on a dime, overnight. Anti-war people were down, signing up to join the Navy, the Army, the Marines, whatever was required.
27 hours after the attack, America declares war on Japan. 3 days later, the U.S. is at war with Germany.
It unleashed the wrath of America. And I think it gave us an energy that carried us through the rest of the war.
Once provoked, that massive tiger of engineering was awakened. We had factories that were sitting underutilized in Detroit and around the country because of the Great Depression. We were ready to go on a building spree.
The sleeping giant awakens. America transforms into an arsenal of democracy. The nation sets to work. Before the war, there were 3 million unemployed. Now, America's huge potential is being realized.
There was no country that had a deeper economic base and an enormous pool of not just labor, but of scientists and engineers and technologists.
An American icon is born. The general purpose vehicle, known as the GP, or the Jeep. It's made for war. Tough, fast, and low to the ground. It's 37 inches high, has a flat hood and a folding windscreen. Its low profile makes it difficult to line up in an enemy's sights. It's small, but can carry up to 7 men. Even the front bumper is a seat. An M1 carbine gun goes just below the windscreen. There's a shovel and an axe to dig yourself out of trouble. There are jerry cans of gas to get you home. If the Jeep flips over, you just lift it out. It weighs in at a lean 2,315 pounds, light enough to be put in gliders and drop behind enemy lines.
What the Jeep symbolized in World War II was not cutting-edge technology, although it was a four-wheel drive vehicle, so it was very capable. But what the Jeep really showed was the power of American manufacturing.
Designed by Bantam and produced by Willys Overland and Ford, 3 Jeeps are produced every 4 minutes by the end of the war.
Over the course of the war, we deployed over 600,000 Jeeps. To fly around this open vehicle at top speed was just something every American boy wanted to grow up to do. To this day, I mean, part of the boom in SUVs that we saw was that notion that you want a vehicle that can go anywhere, that can do anything. It's a very American spirit, and it really started with the Jeep.
Jeeps, tanks, and every other weapon of war will be produced in record numbers. But America's best-kept secret weapon of World War II has yet to be revealed. America sets to work. Plan, overwhelm the enemy through mass production. 88,000 tanks, 7,333 ships, 20 million rifles and small arms, and 40 billion bullets produced in 4 years. 43 million men are registered for combat service. But America needs more manpower. The answer is the best-kept secret weapon of World War II.
It was actually the women back in this nation that were the ones working in the factories, that were putting the tanks together, building the ships, building the airplanes, you know, so they are actually the ones that logistically won the war for us.
Women, like Peggy Blakey, a migrant farm worker. Now she works in a munitions factory, like 2 million other women. The Depression is suddenly over. The factory used to make fireworks. Now it's pumping out 20mm tracer shells. Tracer shells leave a trail of burning chemicals containing magnesium. See where it's going, and you can hit your target. The pressure to produce quickly is real. So is the danger. Just combing your hair could kill you. Static electricity and gunpowder equal explosion. But the risk is worth it. Peggy makes real money, $32 a week.
To us, it was just an absolute miracle. Before that, we made nothing. Now we'd have money to buy shoes and a dress and pay rent and get some food on the table.
And pay taxes. Tax returns jumped from less than 4 million in 1939 to 42 million in 1945. World War II will cost $300 billion. Twice as much as the federal government had spent since George Washington. Women's salaries set off a wartime consumer boom. 11,000 supermarkets are built. Purchases go up 12%.
The precedent of what women had accomplished in World War II did linger in the memory of the society at large, and I think was one of the things that energized the feminist movement a decade or two later.
In World War II, when women entered the workforce, once they got a taste of that kind of fulfillment that work can give you, there was no going back.
But Peggy's job is undeniably dangerous.
I was most worried about the detonators.
Detonators are put into the tip of the shell last. They explode on impact. They set off the gunpowder in the shell. Detonators are extremely unstable. The factory is a giant bomb. It's loaded with tons of explosives. It only takes a spark to set it off.
This terrible thunderstorm came.
Would all staff report to the cafeteria immediately, please?
We were in a hurry to go, and somebody knocked the detonators on the floor. We were in the pitch dark. Somebody was screaming, "Don't move, anybody!" I just froze right where I was. I was afraid to step. I was so scared, I crawled on my hands and knees. We were in slow motion. Because if we'd stepped on one...
Making weapons can be as dangerous as using them. In the first 16 and a half months of the war, 12,000 military men died. But 64,000 American workers die through accidents. Another 6 million are injured. Tonight, Peggy is one of the lucky ones. First, they survived the Depression. Now they risk their lives every day for their country at war.
That was our finest generation in terms of people who would sacrifice and give something of themselves.
300,000 aircraft come out of U.S. factories during the war. America will put them to use with a bold new tactic. High-altitude precision bombing by day, while the British bomb at night. August 17, 1942. These are the men who will see if it can be done. If they survive, the way war is fought will change forever. Paul Tibbets from Quincy, Illinois, one of America's best pilots of the B-17 bomber, the Flying Fortress.
My father thought I was crazy not to be a doctor. He said, "Do you want to go kill yourself? Go ahead."
Planes are cramped, unheated, and unpressurized. Crews suffer claustrophobia, altitude sickness, and frostbite. Of the 111 men on this mission, 31 will be dead or missing by the end of the war. These men depend on each other.
You know, if you ask anybody that's ever been in combat, they will tell you, yeah, sure, you fought for your country, you fought for your way of life, you know, but in all reality, you're fighting for your buddy that's right next to you.
The B-17 bomber is just as tough as its crew. It's got 4 engines, not 2. It's got 4,000 pounds of bombs, and it can go at least 2,000 miles. It bristles like a porcupine. 8 50 caliber machine guns fight off enemy air attacks.
the B-17 bomber. It may not have been the greatest aircraft that was ever created, but it was tough, it was durable, and it found a way to keep going, which is pretty much like an American soldier. You know, tough, durable, and found a way to keep going.
The planes climb. Oxygen keeps you alive above 10,000 feet. No oxygen, you could black out in 3 minutes and die in 20. The target is Rouen, the Germans' biggest railway marshalling yard in northern France. Trains supply the German economic and military empire across Europe. Tibbetts' mission is to wipe the yard from the map. August 17, 1942. Before today, the Allies had only bombed under the cover of night. But targets are hard to see. To increase the chances of a direct hit, America bombs by day. The aim is accuracy. The Norden bomb site is the way to get it. It's an early computer. It's top secret. The crew will destroy it rather than have it fall into enemy hands. Dial in airspeed, wind direction, and altitude.
1 minute to target.
Machine calculates where to fly and when to drop the bombs. By destroying the Germans' economic and industrial base, America will weaken the Nazis' military might. Today's target is key. The railway yards at Rouen keep the German war machine alive.
45 seconds to target.
U.S. air crews pay a high price in casualties to achieve their goal. In 1943 alone, 2/3 of air crews never came home. The weather is perfect for the bombing run. Visibility virtually infinite. But at 23,000 feet, B-17s leave vapor trails. Arrows in the sky, pointing right to the planes. German anti-aircraft fire explodes under the B-17s. Tibbetts keeps his nerves and the plane steady. The computerized bomb sight zeroes in on the target.
Target in sight. Target in sight.
The success of the mission all rests on this moment.
Bombs away!
Success. 36,900 pounds of bombs hit the rail yard. 50% of the bombs fall in the target area. In 1942, that is precision bombing. A big improvement over nighttime attacks. This technology will ultimately lead to today's GPS-guided smart bombs. But now, the direct hit rate is up to 95%. Tibbetts knows his mission is a success.
We caught the Germans by surprise. They hadn't expected a daytime attack.
But then shrapnel rips the air. The Germans open up their big guns. 88mm anti-aircraft shells explode around the plane. Tibbetts goes into a steep climb, swinging away from the flak. They have proved daylight bombing is possible.
A feeling of elation took hold of us as we winged back across the channel. We had braved the enemy in his own skies, and we're alive to tell about it.
All sides bombed industrial targets in cities in World War II. Targeting trade and industry means bombing in or near population centers. A grim fact of World War II that sees ordinary families killed in numbers undreamt of in earlier conflicts. Paul Tibbets will be famous for another bombing run, but it's 3 years away. He will drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. For every B-17 shut down, American workers produced 2 more. Overwhelm the enemy. Overwhelm them with machines and manpower. By 1943, 10 million Americans have been drafted. One is 18-year-old Harold Baumgarten, a New Yorker from the Bronx. He'd been offered a tryout at Yankee Stadium.
But before I could begin playing for the team, I was drafted. On July 10th, 1943, I entered the U.S. Army.
What they did as 18 or 19-year-old soldiers was far and away of greater significance than anything they ever did in the rest of their lives.
William Dabney convinces his grandmother to let him sign up at the age of 17.
I just wanted to follow my buddies.
During a Revolutionary War, 1/6 of all of George Washington's soldiers were black men. And every time in the course of our first couple of 100 years that we had a conflict and we called upon all citizens, black citizens as well, to serve, blacks stepped forward.
Despite the struggles of war, old prejudices remain. Platoons are segregated.
The Army played a significant role because in many ways the Army was the first place that blacks and whites began to have to stand together and represent the same idea, even though they were in segregated barracks.
World War II changed the entire world, but it certainly transformed the black American psyche in a way that led to and made possible the civil rights movement of the 50s and the 60s.
William Dabney volunteers for the exciting sounding Special Service. But all the training in the world cannot prepare him for the horror that is to come. June 1944. Southern England becomes a massive army camp of 3 million Allied troops. Over 1.5 million tons of equipment are shipped and flown from America. The goal is to retake Europe from the Germans. General Dwight D. Eisenhower takes command of the biggest amphibious military operation in history, codenamed Operation Overlord. To the world, the Normandy landings are simply known as D-Day. Every material factor of war is catered for. The Medical Corps alone stockpiles tens of thousands of tons of medical supplies, bandages, morphine, surgical instruments, bedpans, oxygen tents, and X-ray machines. There are prosthetic limbs and even eyeballs in 5 sizes and 4 colors. By 1944, an American combatant could draw on 4 tons of supplies versus a Japanese combatant who had just 2 pounds.
No one had ever produced so much in such a short time. And this is what really shocked both the Japanese and the Germans.
Blood is so crucial The U.S. develops a system of blood banks on an industrial scale. In the 6 months leading up to D-Day, Americans donate a pint of blood every 2 seconds. The blood is turned into plasma so it can be used on the battlefield. It is bottled, put in ice, and packed in cans. But all these supplies are useless without men prepared to die. D-Day is coming. June 5th, 1944. American industry gives the military the means to retake Europe. Now the nation must sacrifice its sons. Over 5.4 million U.S. soldiers will invade Europe in World War II. That's 40 times the number of U.S. combat troops that originally invaded Iraq. This is the night before the biggest single amphibious landing the world has ever seen. D-Day. Harold Baumgarten has come a long way since enlisting a year ago.
Many of us had our heads shaved so that our hair could not be grabbed during hand-to-hand combat.
Many of these men have less than 12 hours to live.
I did not expect to come back alive. I wrote such to my sister to get the mail before my parents and break the news gently to them when she received the telegram.
You know, we were brought up on good guys and bad guys. We go back, we talk about our Westerns that way. Hitler was a clear enemy. I think when you have a really clear enemy, you've won the hearts and minds. There was that commitment of sacrifice.
Eve of battle rituals include Mohican haircuts and war paint. Preparations are mental as well as material. Dog tags are taped together so they don't rattle. Stealth can mean you live or die. One officer tells his men what they can expect.
Look to the right of you. Look to the left of you. There's only going to be one of you left after the first week.
William Dabney now knows what his special service mission is. He has to drag a barrage balloon ashore while under heavy fire. It's a tactic designed to block German troops. His chances are slim, yet he is determined to survive.
I will return. I will come back to the USA. I'm not looking forward to getting shot and killed. I'm looking forward to going home.
More than 70,000 American troops are about to invade German-held France. Over 1,000 will die on the first day, June 6, 1944, D-Day. Over 5,000 ships and 10,000 aircraft are involved in the first wave alone. 5 beaches will be stormed. The most infamous is codenamed Omaha Beach.
Think about Omaha Beach from the standpoint of the young man. The ramp is about to drop, and the sights and the sounds all around provide the context of hell.
The first troops on Omaha Beach meet ferocious German resistance. Rocket launchers, mortars, and 85 machine gun nests tear into the Americans. There were meant to be 32 tanks with them, but 27 sink. The men are left with virtually no cover on the beach. William Dabney is totally exposed. Tethered to his barrage balloon, he's defenseless. When it's shot down, he has his chance. Like every other soldier on Omaha Beach, black or white, Dabney's mission now is to survive.
There wasn't any segregation there.
Harold Baumgarten is thrown straight into the carnage.
There were men with guts hanging out of their wounds and body parts lying along our path.
Some men were simply overwhelmed by the hell they met. By 9 a.m., almost 5,000 men are ashore. There are more than 2,000 U.S. casualties on Omaha Beach alone. William Dabney survives. He is later awarded the Legion of Honor. Operation Overlord is a logistical miracle, but the cost is staggering. Nearly 126,000 Americans are killed, wounded, or go missing during the Battle of Normandy. Harold Baumgarten is hit 5 times. After losing blood for over 30 hours, Baumgarten is brought back from the dead by a plasma transfusion, then injections of penicillin and morphine. The very supplies America has mass-produced to keep its men alive. D-Day is key to Hitler's defeat. Within a month, the Allies have landed more than 877,000 troops, 112,000 vehicles, and 573,000 tons of supplies. U.S. bombing destroys German oil reserves and transportation. American machinery and men powers the drive to Berlin and victory in Europe. But men are still dying fighting the Japanese. America turns to technology once again. A weapon to end the war. A weapon to change the world. The Alamogordo Desert, New Mexico. July 16th, 1945, 5:27 a.m. In 3 minutes, American technology will change the world forever. Robert Oppenheimer, the theoretical physicist who loves poetry as much as science. The FBI would track his every move, worried that he's a communist. Yet Oppenheimer leads the biggest scientific test in history, the top-secret Manhattan Project. Theoretically, fission physics could enable enormous amounts of explosive energy to be released from a single device, the atomic bomb. The bomb is the most technologically advanced weapon in the world, yet nobody is sure whether it will work.
Even many of the people who worked on the bomb itself were skeptical that the bomb would actually work. No one had ever done anything like this.
The use of bombing escalates on all sides in World War II, so that whole cities of civilians are being hit. Now the U.S. military hope a single bomb can destroy an entire city.
Wreaking that kind of mass destruction. That was something new in the history of warfare. The atomic bombs put an emphatic punctuation to that decision, but the decision was way before August of 1945.
If this test works, there are more atomic bombs to use on the Japanese in hopes of ending the war. Deputy Commanding General of the Manhattan Project, Thomas Farrell, watches Oppenheimer.
Dr. Oppenheimer grew tenser as the last seconds ticked off. He scarcely breathed. He stared directly ahead.
11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The temperature generated at the center of the explosion is 10,000 times greater than the surface of the sun. The heat turns the desert sand to glass. The explosion is more massive than even Oppenheimer expects.
When it went off in the New Mexico dawn, that first atomic bomb, we thought of Alfred Nobel and his hope, his vain hope that dynamite would put an end to wars.
Even the scientists themselves recognized the gravity of that moment. And of course, Oppenheimer famously said, "I become death, the destroyer of worlds," quoting the Bhagavad Gita, and recognizing that man had really reached a turning point where the power available to us was almost limitless.
When atomic bombs are dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, an estimated 120,000 people die instantly. Over the days, months, and years that follow, up to 80,000 more die slowly. A day after the second bomb is dropped, the Japanese surrender. America's technical innovation is decisive in winning the bloodiest war in history. Having survived the Depression and World War II, the greatest generation comes home.
They'd been through it all, and they wanted one thing. They wanted a better life for their families than they'd had. And that's what they dedicated themselves to.
America's distance from battle leaves its infrastructure intact and its economy vibrant. It produces twice as much oil as the rest of the world combined. It has half the world's manufacturing capacity and 2/3 of its gold stocks.
And they had no real competition in the world because Europe was devastated, Asia was devastated, and America could be the colossus that it became.
World War II transforms the USA in only 4 years. Americans make twice as much money as they did before the war. They have 50 million babies in 15 years. There are 20 million new jobs in 25 years. America becomes a superpower. America's.
Okay, guys, so hopefully that gave you an overview of what we're going to kind of be looking at here as we dive into World War II. So the quiz is open for you now. You can go ahead and get started on that. And when you're done, you're free to go. So you'll probably get out a little bit early today. Make sure you submit that reflection as well.